Well, good morning and welcome back to our podcast. I have a very dear friend sitting with me here in our home in Costa Mesa, California. Nate is a new church planter, but his story is not new. And I thought, as we have introduced others who are on a similar adventure to the one you're on, to give Nate an opportunity to tell his story, the lessons he's learned, and some of the challenges that they face. So, ladies and gentlemen, Nate. You've got a story. Everyone's got a story. Everyone's story matters. So, pre-church planter, who was Nate? Who is Nate? And what have you done?
So, I grew up in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Spent my whole childhood and upbringing on the East Coast, Savannah, Georgia, and then Myrtle Beach until high school years.
What did your folks do there?
Yeah, my mom is a nurse, and my dad's a pastor, church planter, and now works in helping equip and train pastors locally and globally, a lot of travel. So that was, when I was a kid, my dad was still like a full pastor of a local church.
Cool.
And so that was upbringing, middle of 7 kids, 3 boys, 4 girls, and yeah, so we grew up there surfing.
Was that cool? Was that fun having such a big family?
I loved it. I like the idea. I don't have any kids now, but I like the idea of a large family because it was really fun for me. But
Do you think you'll have a large one?
I'd like to. But my siblings, like some of them are like one and done or like not even. So I don't know. I think I'm extroverted and like down with being around a lot of people all the time. So for me, it was an awesome experience.
Right, great.
Yeah.
So Myrtle Beach, what else did you do there?
I learned or got into surfing there. My dad's a surfer, and so that was part of our like daily before school, after school, weekends, just at the beach, and grew a love for competing and ended up doing online school in high school so that I could finish up a year early and start traveling and surfing competitively. So that was a big part of upbringing there, and then family and traveling.
So what age did you start competing and realizing surfing was your future?
I think around 11-ish years old, I just heard of a local surf competition and told my parents that I'd like to enter it. And they're like, great, how are you going to pay for it? And so I was like, well, I guess I'll mow some grass. And so used our lawnmower and went knocking on doors and earned enough money to enter the contest. And then I ended up making a couple of rounds in the event. Actually lost to a girl there, so that was like, that was awesome. And but that was my first introduction to surfing competitively. But I really enjoyed it, and so made a bunch of friends around the beach, and that was who I liked to hang out with. And so I entered more and more, so that was like middle school, and then by high school was up and down the East Coast, and then did my first trip out here to California when I was 16. I turned 17 on that trip, and then from there. Opened up to travel.
And your folks were totally stoked that you were going to be traveling as a professional surfer.
My dad, for sure, and I think it went my dad, then my mom, because I think he had to kind of convince her. But they were both, I think, laid a great example of just setting me up to hear from God myself and to pursue dreams and passions. And so it wasn't like you do this or fit in this box. It's like a journey that they allowed me to help decide and fail and succeed at. And so whenever I would come home and leave, my mom would be often crying, but she's like, these aren't sad tears. I'm just happy to see you and excited to see what God's doing. And so
at what age did you develop your own personal faith? Obviously you grew up in a church/Jesus loving home, but at what age did you realize, no, this is something I believe for myself?
Around kind of coinciding with starting to compete, I was baptized as a little kid, but I really did get it. I really did give my life to Jesus, and I remember that turning into wanting to not just be a personal thing, but also something that is open to my friends. And I remember in middle school, after being prayed over, actually by some pastors and friends of our family, I went back to the beach and was surfing, and in the water got to just tell my friend about Jesus, that a guy we'd hung out a whole bunch. I was like 13. And then after that, I remember in school, in the hallways, just sharing the gospel with friends in 7th and 8th grade. And after leaving home, after high school and traveling, I think that was even just like another level of actually having full jurisdiction to do what I wanted and realizing that I want Jesus and I love him and want my friends to know him, want my life to be for him. And so it was I guess, up and down progressive journey from childhood.
Sure. But you were an accidental church planter.
Yeah.
You stumbled into a story. Tell us a little bit of how you've landed where you are.
Yeah, so as I was competing full-time and traveling, opportunities started to come up to speak at youth groups or camps or churches or testimonies, and then got to preach a few times. And from having my dad as a role model and several others who've influenced me, I love to speak and share and just encourage people. And then I came out to California 2 years ago, so the start of 2018, and I had a mentor whose name was Sumo Sato, and he was this big Samoan, Hawaiian, Japanese guy who had a church here in Huntington. And awesome story of God's work in his life, from running the opposite direction for a lot of years to church planting. And he took me and my now co-pastor just as under his wing. And as I was traveling, we'd often FaceTime and talk, and he was just a huge encourager for me. And so he was diagnosed with cancer several years ago, and then in 2018 was on hospice care in his home. And those months I was here in Huntington Beach and was just spending days with him in the living room, crying, worshiping. He'd have his guitar, ukulele, and just crying out to God like I've never experienced before. And during that time, he was too sick to be at church, and so he had me and my friend Kai go, and he'd do worship, and I'd teach or I'd speak, and we just thrust into it.
Stumbled into it.
And then about a month or two before he passed away in March of 2018, he asked Kai and I, or kind of just told us, hey, you're going to carry the church on. And although I never had want to be a pastor, want to be a church planter, I love Jesus and I love people. And so when he said that, it was like, yeah,
wonderful.
That's what I'm going to do.
Wonderful. Nate, there was, about 15 people in the community just after Suma passed. And you and Kai have a remarkable relationship, because it seems to be a deeply loving, honoring collaboration of co-partnership. And it seems to be working for you guys.
It does. I think when we were stepping into it, had a lot of wise counsel and people just alongside us, encouraging us, and really wasn't sure how, co-pastoring, because we didn't have a pre-thought of what it was going to be. It was just a friend, though. And so it was, because we were both mourning at the same time and we were both just thrust into it together, it was awesome to just have a buddy to hang on to. And now, 2 years later, it's just a great friendship's developed. We got engaged to our wives a week apart, got married 3 weeks apart, and just a great friendship. So it's really been mission together and a loving relationship that I think's fueled a lot of it.
As a young church planter, what's been the single most difficult thing you've had to face?
I think open hands. I think even though I had no desire necessarily to be a pastor, now 2 years into it, I find myself at times having ideas or strategies or things that I think are great ideas, and so I want to hold them like this. And I've just found that being super burdening and tiring. And so I think it's a daily prying open of my hands with time, with people, with where we think things should end up, where we feel a movement in the church should end up. I think just opening up my hands, and that's opened up my heart and to really, even my eyes, to just see what God's doing and have ideas in a direction, but be super open with what God's doing, because it's, when I try to hold it like this, it's no good.
You are an extrovert. You love people. You're a nice guy. And you probably haven't experienced too much rejection in your life. So, as happens with every church planter, people leave because of something we've said or done, or they just don't like us, How have you coped with people leaving your community in the light of you being just a jolly nice guy?
That I think's played in with that open hands and closed hands thing, because I think the first few who, because we're thrust into it in the way we were, it's thought that, these forever, and then you see that everything's for a season. And I think my dad was a good voice in that, pastor in years, been through churches that have stayed together and those that have gone divided over different things. And so I think to have that open posture it's a daily battle for me because I love people and want to be with them forever. It's a daily, I think, just openness to God and knowing that it's not your church, it's his church.
Wonderful.
And, yeah.
One last thing. What do you love about what you do?
I love Huntington Beach, where we're pastoring now, and I love the world, and traveling was a big part of like just my heartbeat. Feel at home in a plane on the road, and so that Huntington now with surfing and a lot of my friends coming in and out of town, it's really opened up the world, that it's just the global perspective of what pastoring a church is, and that it is on the ground here in Huntington and it is around the world in South Africa or wherever we get to go. So I just love getting to pursue Jesus and where that's wound me up somewhere totally different than I would have thought or planned or even wanted to if you would have asked me 5 years ago. But just how at peace I think I am with it, right? Like in the moment of pastoring, I just love that God's led it to where it is and where he's going to be taking us down the road.
Wonderful. Church planting is fun. It has its bruising moments for sure. It has challenges because every one of us has limitations and nothing exposes them quite like church planting. This is a great young man. It's a very fun church. They meet in a parking lot at the Surfing Museum in Huntington Beach, and it's like preaching on the street corner every Sunday. It's an enormous amount of fun. Watch their story. It's curious, it's fun, it's different, and it reminds us that we cannot be too anchored into a singular ecclesiology. God has wonderful ways to reach wonderful people, and we've got to remain spirit-led and pretty organic to do that wonderfully well. Catch you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye now.